Heaven and Back, a methadone and ibogaine trip report by Jason, posted to earwid.org May 10th, 2006. For the umpteenth time, I was reducing off the methadone. I got down to 25 milligrams, and then unfortunately, I started using once again. I then went up to 60 milligrams. This was very depressing, wanting to get off the methadone, and knowing that I would have to reduce again and go through all of this all over. As we know, to reduce from 60 milligrams down to 25 milligrams is much easier than that from 25 milligrams to 0. If I can't handle going to 25 milligrams, how am I going to go from 25 milligrams to nothing? I don't think I can do this anymore. I've been trying for so many years. I was quickly losing interest in living. I just wanted to go home to the other side. Being addicted to opiates for 23 years has become too much to bear. I was at my wit's end. I was giving up and going down fast. One day, soon after, in utter despair, I had a thought come into my head. Hang in there. It's almost over. Being desperate to be pulled out of the ocean of addiction, I held on to that thought. How exactly could this nearly be over? It'll take another year at least to reduce to 60 milligrams. But the thought kept coming to me over and over again. Hang in there, it's almost over. I started to get some hope back. I thought the only way this can be over quick is if I find a great rehab and come straight off the stuff. I now believe the voice in my head was my brother who had passed on. He'd also battled with addiction all his life. I started to search the internet and found this great rehab in the States that uses some of Ron Hubbard's techniques. Nutrition, sauna, and other things. I had heard of this type of treatment before, and I was hopeful. I contacted them and spoke to this great guy, who unfortunately I cannot remember the name of. This man told me that I needed to detox before coming to the rehab, and advised me a couple of methods, one of which being the controversial Ibogaine or iboga, and he gave me a URL to an Ibogaine site. I logged onto this site and started talking to some of the people, and reading as much as I could absorb on Ibogaine. I was fortunate to be able to talk to a few people before treatment, as well as during and after. The surge of hope flowing through me was incredible. I could finally see a way out. I was getting goosebumps. I applied for a loan and got it. I spoke to some providers and then rang S in Amsterdam. It was then booked and organised. I took 600 milligrams of Septem with me, basically methadone in a tablet, and worked out that if I triple dosed for the next 3 days or so, I would be finished with them as I got to Sarah's, the final stone on opiates before detoxing. I got to Amsterdam airport and was warmly greeted with a hug from S. We jumped into the car and drove to her place. I gave S what little Septone I had left. But when I got to S's, the fear started to set in. This was it. Oh shit, what am I doing here? I don't think I can actually do this. Nah, I can't do this, I have to go back. For the next few hours, I was trying to figure out how I was going to get back at all. S could see how utterly scared I was and started to calm me. I would have rathered a bear came into the camp to attack, as I could have seen what I was facing. I stayed the night and woke in the morning very anxious. Fuck. No methadone. Can't go back and face everyone not having at least tried this though, I guess. I started to get a little sick in the afternoon, and S gave me my first dose of 1 gram of iboga extract. I lay down, and after about 1 hour, I started to feel relaxed and more at ease with the iboga, a slight vibrating sensation. Knowing this was a very spiritual plant, I gave thanks with each dose and asked for guidance. An hour or two later, I was given 1.8 grams. The vibrating became more and more intense. and I felt a low-pitched buzzing in my head and a vibration in my body. Very relaxing, and no withdrawals. About an hour or two later, I was then given 3 grams, and the low-frequency type of vibrating became more intense. And then I found myself in the jungle, or somewhere similar to it. I was on a mat on the ground, and there were 7 or 8 tribespeople on each side of it. They picked me up on the mat and started wobbling it, side to side. I knew in that moment that they were healing me. I was vibrating and saw my cells being vibrated. Within my cells were dark blockages, little bits of black in these brilliant white cells, as I was being wobbled side to side, and I could see my cells vibrating more and more. The blackness started to vibrate out of my cells, and the dark blockages were being dissipated to the sides of the cells and disappearing. It was then that I was given 5 grams, and after a while there was like this explosion, and I found myself on a round medallion type of thing about 8 feet in diameter, like a huge coin of sorts. I was spread-eagled on this medallion and could not move, arms and legs all spread out. One side of this medallion was a brilliant, brilliant white, and the other side was pitch black. The medallion started to flip whilst going up, and then it stopped on an angle facing up at about 120 degrees. And then it felt like people put their hands inside my body, my bones from my back, and then they ripped away with a crack. And as this happened, the back of the medallion, which was pitch black, snapped away, and even though I was still spread-eagled on the coin, I felt myself falling into this pitch black abyss. This feeling of falling, and at the same time, knowing I was also on the medallion feeling safe. The feeling of falling disappeared, and yet I was still on the medallion. The medallion was now only a brilliant white. It started to flip again and go up, making this type of sound as it went up, like a woof, woof, woof. The medallion came to a stop, and I was facing this most beautiful light. Love, acceptance. More than light, more than love. Do not have the words to explain such a sight. A vast light like a liquid love. So bright, so expansive. I was a little concerned, and I was told there is nothing to fear. Face the light. And as I did, the light which was everything in that existence, there was nothing else at all. It started to move towards me, and then went through me, and what a feeling that was. I started to get champagne bubbles of light going through me, up from my stomach, splitting at the base of my heart, exiting through my shoulders. Shring, shring, shring. It was like I had to be cleansed before going any further. It was like trying to mix 14-karat gold with 24-karat gold. If one does, they taint the pure gold. And so I was smelted, purified, so to say. One of my brothers was killed about 2 years ago. As I was in this light, I saw his head. It was moving from side to side, with these white flames coming off his head like locks of white liquid light. His mouth did not move, but he was speaking to me. There was light coming from his eyes and from his closed mouth, like he was facing a fan, and the fan was blowing his hair, but it wasn't exactly his hair. "You cannot die," he said to me. "You simply leave your body behind and vibrate into another dimension. I am still alive, just in another dimension now. If you truly want to honor my name, live life to the fullest, and I will live through you until you come home." The love pouring from him was incredible. He was incredible, and so beautiful. I still see him clearly. I was shown I am one with everything, and I felt it. I was told I can experience anyone that ever was or is. Yet, who do I wish to experience? I wanted to feel what it would be like to be Jesus. And as I thought this, I was coming into a body from above. This being of light had white light as hair saddling his shoulders. And as I entered this body of light, I got this tremendous feeling of love coming out of my mouth and outstretched hands. Like beacons of light coming from my hands, and a tremendous feeling of love and compassion within, being sent out within this world. Whoa. I was falling in love with love itself. This was pure and utter bliss. And as I woke up, I felt as if my heart was outside of my body. It was turned inside out and twisted a little like a gene. I went to get up, and as I did, it felt like I would leave my heart behind if I moved too fast. A bit like how your stomach would feel as you go down a roller coaster. And for the next 24 hours or so, I had to cradle my heart outside of my body, like it was my heart's spirit. I would lay down cradling what looked like an empty space above my chest, which I felt was my heart outside my body. It felt red raw, inside out, twisted, and it hurt. After about 24 hours or so, my heart felt like it was untwisting and going back inside me. Then something started to fill my heart with what looked and felt like liquid golden honey. They filled it until my heart overflowed with love. I could feel the liquid honey overflowing and trickling down. The feeling of this was so filling, and the love I felt was more than anything I can honestly describe in words. For the next 7 days, I had no withdrawals. My energy was non-existent though, and I couldn't sleep. After about 7 days, I started to feel some withdrawals, about 5%. And not sleeping was driving me mad. I was so very bored. I was listening to a lot of music, day and night. A lot of Pink Floyd's The Division Bell. I was so happy though. I'm free. Fuck me, I can't believe it. Wow. I kept thinking this over and over and would cry with joy. I'm free. I'm finally free. After about 3 weeks, I had approximately up to 15% withdrawals. However, they were different this time. Not at a soul level, more physical. Like I was just sick and recovering. I stayed at S's for 27 days, and in this time took nutrients and S cooked yummy food. Now I am into my 4th month. I still feel a little not right, however, but I am getting stronger every day. Please bear in mind I have had 23 years of addiction and came off methadone due to this. My aftercare consists of no friends around me that are using, as well as drinking herbs and a lot of nutrients. They make the mind stronger. No sugar at all except for fruit or an occasional short black coffee. And smoking pot has helped tremendously, as well as exercising, which has helped my sleep. Socializing and laughing my head off is also great. I went to a nightclub and laughed so much that I got kicked out. I honestly couldn't believe it. I have steam baths at the gym to help sweat out the methadone. And to help with sleep, I took kava kava, passion flower and valerian. On top of this, I was also taking Metagenics Fibroplex Plus, as well as vitamin B complex and other nutrients. It cannot be properly stated just how much good food is to a huge recovery, and a lot of water. I also gave up many years of smoking tobacco. I do still feel like a cigarette now and then, however the urge goes within a minute or two of disappearing. I still find it hard to concentrate, and I do get impatient. Normally, I'm a very patient and tolerant man.
An Ibogaine trip report by Sharon, posted to earwid.org December 14th, 2024. I recently participated in an Ibogaine ceremony. My intentions were to heal some sensed but undefined trauma, as well as opening emotional and energetic channels, getting insight into the nature of craving, exploring my psyche, and to follow my curiosity. I was inspired to write this trip report to share the visions that I saw, hoping to connect with others whose Ibogaine journeys led them to similar places of healing and wonder. I also wanted to memorialise and honour the experience, the medicine, and the people who made it possible. The process of writing this has been an important part of recalling and integrating the insights into my life. In summary, working with Ibogaine helped me better understand and accept myself. I felt compassion for children in early developmental stages and a calling to make the world safer for them. I saw a vision of humanity without conflict, where people cooperate, love, create, and are connected to nature. I saw how the earth participates and contributes to the greater universe. I saw aspects of how the mind works, how thoughts generate, and the role of awareness. Lastly, I interacted with what seemed to be a higher intelligence through a game of riddles. The arrival and fire ceremony. The retreat was held at a comfortable, spacious house with scenic views. There were 6 participants with ages ranging from late 30s to early 50s. The staff included 3 facilitators, a cook, and medical personnel. We arrived on Friday afternoon, with the Ibogaine ceremony scheduled for that night. Upon arrival, we unpacked, explored the house, and started to get to know each other. The house had multiple levels with big rooms, comfortable furniture, and engaging art. There was a library room stacked with interesting titles and several balconies overlooking natural scenery. After settling in, a facilitator invited us to gather in a group circle and explained how this was an opportunity for transformation and connection. Each of us took a turn introducing ourselves and explained what brought us there, as well as our struggles, aspirations, and intentions. There were moments of vulnerability, stories of personal challenges, and an overall sense of being heard and supported. She invited us to create a series of drawings. The first 2 represented what we wanted to let go of. The third was what we aspired towards. I drew 2 abstract pictures representing blocked energy and a future state picture symbolising radiant, flowing energy. Others drew pictures representing transformation in important personal relationships. Later, we went outside for what was called the fire ceremony. The sun had just set. We circled around a small fire, and one of the facilitators guided the group in an indigenous-style prayer to the 6 directions. We were invited to cast our first 2 drawings into the fire, making a symbolic break with the past. We were given capsules of ibogaine, a piece of hematite crystal, and a candle. After some time for reflection, we took the ibogaine and walked up to the ceremony room, where the real journey began. Just before the ceremony, a nurse had taken our vitals and weighed us to calculate the ibogaine dosage. We received IVs for hydration and electrolytes. Now, as we lay down on our mattresses, she hooked us up to EKG machines. Ibogaine can present heart risks for certain people, and the medical staff wanted to monitor us for safety throughout the night. The journey. The ceremony room glowed with candles surrounding the perimeter. Music played, ambient, spiritual, and world beats, with minimal vocals. The door was open to a cool, dark night outside. It was an impressive ambience. I looked around the room as my fellow travellers put their eye masks on and got comfortable on their mattresses. I've worked with a variety of plant medicines in the past, but didn't know what to expect with Ibogaine. I was told the journey could last 12 to 36 hours. I'd heard stories about long, intense trips, but I'd also heard about the entheogen's power to heal. I brought my intentions to mind. I'd picked 4 words to help guide and ground me, and journaled about them leading up to the retreat. Acceptance, presence, love, and abundance. In that moment, acceptance resonated the most. I'd signed up for this months before, journaled about my intentions, travelled far, and the moment was finally here. I had some trepidation at knowing I was in for a journey into the unknown, but I felt safe with the staff and environment. It was time to lay back, focus on my breath, and be present with whatever came up. Onset and effects. I first perceived Ibogaine through bodily sensations. It came on perhaps 30 or 40 minutes after I took the capsules. A light wooziness passed through my body, not unlike the initial subtle shifts I've felt with the onset of other plant medicines. Shortly after, I sensed an unfamiliar buzzing sound in my ears. It wasn't pleasant or unpleasant, but it was pronounced and unfamiliar. Interesting. In my imagination, I saw a white line against a dark surface etching back and forth, similar to the pattern of the letter Z. The journey was underway, and throughout the experience I was conscious, could direct my thoughts, as well as move my own body. Physically, I felt a sense of oscillation, as though awareness had weight and swept back and forth across my body, heavier on one side and lighter on the other, scanning side to side. My normal sense of stability was altered as well. When walking to the bathroom later, the staff had to physically support me with an arm. Some experienced physical purging, but I never felt the urge. Mentally, I felt awake all night, but my awareness relaxed into an inner world of intuition, visions, felt sense, and imagination. The visions I describe appeared in the way I see things in a dream, except I was fully conscious. My eyes were closed and I wore an eye mask. Typical mental chatter was suspended. I was alert and present. I could hear the music and occasionally one of the other participants, but it was mostly quiet and introspective. The rest of this report is an attempt to describe the visions and insights that came up during this journey. The entheogens seemed to identify the most important issues in my psyche, guiding my attention to those areas and helping me reframe my understanding for the better. My attempt to put this into words is inadequate compared to the experience. It was incredible. Healing the past and self-acceptance. When reflecting in the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I couldn't point to any particular life event that I'd call traumatic, but I sensed that there was some underlying stress from my past that was inhibiting me. Ibogaine prioritised this and took me directly to the root of what it was. Keeping the description general, it related to very early childhood development and had to do with safety, generational patterns, and freedom of expression. This part of the journey was lengthy and deep. I saw myself, others, and my environment in those earliest years of my life, and for the first time recognised how they shaped who I am. I'd never intentionally thought about or integrated my early life with who I've become as an adult. I've lived much of my life influenced by ideas about self-determinism. While acknowledging that genetics and nurturing have some role, I focused on trying to shape myself into what I thought I should be without much attention on what I'd already become. Initially, it was unsettling to realise that there are aspects of myself that are more or less fixed from very early on. It felt limiting to realise that we humans don't get to choose the foundational ingredients in the recipe that forms us. Gradually, I came to see that this is the way of nature, and is therefore something to accept. With that acceptance came relief, knowing that I don't have to apologise for who I am, hide, or try to re-engineer myself. To reconcile the past with the present was very healing. Next, I saw images of my current self, physically and energetically. Maybe they represented how I perceive myself or how I imagine others perceive me. It wasn't flattering. But later that night, when I was in the bathroom and happened to look in the mirror, I felt relief. I saw that I wasn't the distorted images I'd fabricated about myself. I saw myself as upright, capable, and worthy of acceptance. Children and development. The journey transitioned onto the next phase, which was less visual and more contemplative. The insights about the significance of childhood development generalised beyond my own situation. These are not topics I normally think about or study, so while I imagine these are mundane insights for many, they were rather revelatory for me. I saw that how we're nurtured shapes important aspects of the fabric of our personality. Our disposition towards feeling safe, feeling heard, and feeling free to express. We carry this early imprinting through our lives. It impacts our capacity for harmony with ourselves and others, and therefore the extent to which we suffer and find joy in this life. In those early stages of life, I saw a natural cycle where babies depend on their mothers for safety and love, and where the mothers in turn depend on their partners and community for safety and love, so that they can focus on nurturing. A mother's disposition towards rewarding and punishing a child's behaviour is influenced by how she was raised. A father's willingness to provide support to the mother and child is largely a function of how he was raised. I got the impression that everyone was doing their best with what they had, doing what they thought was right. I thought of people I know, how their childhoods shaped them, and felt compassion and joy. I began to extrapolate, realizing that our world is made up of billions of people shaped by the first few years of life. Humanity's capacity to cooperate is largely a function of how each individual was raised, how much love and attention they received, how they were encouraged to express themselves, and the values they learned from watching their parents or guardians. What issue could be more important than getting childhood development right? I felt a call to action, but wondered how I could actually help. As someone who doesn't have kids, it occurred to me that the most direct thing I could do was to find a partner, have our own child or children, and dedicate myself to their well-being. I recognised and accepted that this may or may not happen. If it didn't happen, that was okay. I could find a path that leads to making the world safer for children anyway. Mr. Rogers came to mind. If it did happen, for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable with the idea of being a father. Humanity. Next, the entheogen seemed to recognise the weight of certain existential questions within me, and led me to some insights. From a young age, I've been struck by a sense of wonder about what we're doing here. What's behind the power of a thunderstorm? What's the significance of my life when there are so many people on this planet? What are any of us doing here, in a world that seems could be peaceful but often isn't? Where do we come from, and where do we go? This part of the journey was again more contemplative. I realised that humanity has a natural tendency to evolve towards greater cooperation with each new generation. Parents learn from how they were nurtured, wanting the best for the children. They're inclined to improve upon that experience. In individual cases, this might not always play out well, but in the grand scheme, generations naturally tend towards better nurturing over time, leading to greater harmony among people. This insight transitioned into a macro, dreamlike vision of humanity through a zoomed-out image of the Earth. It was a joyful place, alive with humans creating, cooperating, living happily, breathing, loving. The Earth was vibrant, bumping and thriving. I didn't see individual people, but had a sense of unification and harmony. People were connected with each other and with the Earth. There were no wars or divisions. Buddhism appeared in the dream as an abstract guiding symbol of a brown cloth on Earth, a blending of imagery and concepts. The whole planet, humans, plants and animals, flourished. I felt these images as I saw them, emotionally and physically. The joyful vision was balanced out with insights about some of the things that divide people today: poverty, racial discrimination, misunderstandings from language, the narrow way women are portrayed in porn. I didn't choose to pick these issues, they came to me and I just felt a sadness. I reflected on the consequences of poverty, on households and children. I saw that fixating on differences between people, skin colour come to mind, unnecessarily inhibits our ability to connect at a personal level. On language, it occurred to me that conflict often arises from misunderstandings between different languages, and from imprecision within any single language. How can all humans communicate with each other, regardless of which part of the world we're from? How can we more fully and clearly express what we feel? I didn't get immediate answers during the journey, but language has come up in other plant medicine ceremonies, and it felt like another call to action. Interlude. Writing about the journey hardly captures the essence of it. I was experiencing dreamlike visions along with embodied emotions that accompanied them. I was seeing life through a new perspective. Things were being reframed. In retrospect, it was as though I was being guided by one of those spirits from the Christmas Carol on a journey through my psyche. There were moments to pause and reflect on the visions, often leading to insights. Throughout, I was on my mattress with my eye shades on. I'd get up occasionally to have a sip of water or gently stagger to the bathroom with the help of one of the staff. I didn't have a precise sense of time. I knew it was the middle of the night though. Sometimes I'd hear one of the other participants, but it was mostly quiet apart from the music, which was supportive and reassuring. Lila by Benji Wertheimer was on the playlist and brings me back to the experience. I was in awe of the journey, fully engaged with it and wanting to continue. As it progressed, the vision zoomed out in scale and became more abstract. It started with my own situation, broadened out to all people, and now it moved into the scale of Earth and the cosmos. The next lesson was a continuation of the existential questions theme, and showed me that humanity and the Earth have a role to play with the greater universe. The great gig in the sky. I had a perception of looking at space. It was like the inner space sometimes perceived in the stillness of meditation. The space was featureless except for the content of the visions. I saw an image of the Earth in the context of the overall universe. I realised, or received a message, that the Earth performs some kind of compositing or recycling function. There is a featureless conveyor that connects the Earth to the universe. Each human's breathing and love somehow exchanges with this system. Plants, animals, and the rest of life play a role in the theatre of the greater cosmos. The imagery was abstract without details, but the implication felt significant. Earth isn't just an arbitrary rock spinning in space that happens to have humans on it. We're part of a bigger system that we don't directly perceive, and each person is contributing just through being alive, breathing, and participating. Next, I saw a platform in space that generated one colourful shape after the next at a high but effortless volume and velocity. I saw it from a slight bottom angle. It didn't seem to be an entity or have a personality though. I was astonished at how it created without pause, without thought or editing. The created stuff flowed constantly. There was no hesitation about what to create or why, it just created. It was always creating, and it would always create, infinitely. It was inspiring. I thought about my personal inclinations to plan and edit, which can get in the way of just creating. I wish I could describe more about these two visions. They were breathtaking. Felt like I caught a brief glimpse behind the curtain. I speculated on what they might mean, but to honour the insights as they came to me, I'll leave this description with the open sense of wonder that I left with. The mind. Looking again into an otherwise empty space, an image appeared. A post-it notepad with pages whirring off, one after the next. Each note contained random ideas. It symbolised the part of the mind that generates thoughts. The thought generator, or meme generator, was the name that came to me. Watching it, I realised that I don't have immediate control over which thought arises next. An idea that I've read about, but was now visualising. I realised that the thought generator is informed by what goes into the mind. The people, environment, ideas, entertainment, sensory information. The thought generator pulls from that content and presents it to conscious awareness. I thought about the significance of what we put and let into our minds, and how we become like the people we spend time with. While watching the thoughts fly off the thought generator pad, I realised that I am distinct from my thoughts. I've had some sense of this before from meditating, but this was a more visceral perspective. I perceived a delineation between the chatter of my thoughts and the more relaxed open awareness that observes them. If the thought generator was in the front of my mind, awareness was in the back, non-judgmental, observing. While I don't always, or ever, have a choice about what thought comes up next, I do have the ability to observe it and not get caught up in it. I saw that I can practice just being aware of the thought generator, zooming back and quietly watching it. I sometimes identify with the thoughts about myself, perhaps a memory or self-perception, as though they are me. I realise that really they're really just incomplete aspects of me, from a particular frame of time. This meant I could let go of judgments or emotional reactions to spontaneous thoughts about myself by remembering that they're not me. Practice doing this in the moment. Thoughts about identity transition into thoughts about what if anything persists after death. Perhaps dying involves letting go of the sense of self I create and cling to from all the fragments of memories and thoughts. Maybe I merge into that quiet space of awareness. I felt some trepidation about the idea of letting go of my sense of self, but also some hope at the prospect of continuing on in another form. I perceived a source of light or energy in the back of my head. It can brighten my perspective, and it's the place where smiles originate. It is always there to help me. I just have to be aware of it. Riddles. In the last chapter of the journey, I interacted with something that felt like a higher intelligence. It presented me with a game of riddles. We went through multiple rounds. My recollection of details even immediately after the journey was blurry though. However, I was presented with a riddle, tried to reason through it, and couldn't. It occurred to me that I could ask for help. I felt some emotional resistance to this, but eventually I just did it. Asking for help led to solving the riddle, or was the solution to the riddle. I was rewarded with celebration visuals and sounds, and feeling as though I was being launched up to a higher level. After several iterations, I reached a point where I was presented with two cards that seemed to ask if I'm ready to accept death. I felt fear. It didn't occur to me to ask for help. As I resisted and disengaged from the game, it felt as though the spirit of the Ibogaine began leaving me. It was as if someone flipped a switch and power was gradually dimming down. In my final vision, I looked up into the darkness at the two cards. The content of these messages is a mystery, since I don't recall specifics, but I saw that my initial assumptions about the cards, about death, were not accurate. There are more possibilities than I realise. My fear was misplaced. I felt relief, curiosity. I was ready for the journey to continue, but sensed it was over. I'd seen what I needed to see. It began with the wonder infancy, and ended with the mystery of death. Winding down. By this time it was early Saturday morning. I laid there until mid to late Saturday afternoon, awake, exhausted, exhilarated, and processing everything that happened. I replayed the visions and insights, knowing I'd record them later. The range, depth, and significance of what I'd seen and contemplated was profound. I didn't want the journey to end. There was so much still to explore. But I also recognised that I had a new sense of purpose in life, and knew that I have a role to play back in normal reality. When I finally got up, I walked downstairs and sat on a balcony overlooking the ocean. I shared my experience with one of the facilitators, a skillful listener, and began writing down what I'd seen. As I looked out at the world, I felt sensitive, emotionally open, and innocent like I was a child. Afterward. In documenting this, I've tried to be true to the experience and insights as they came to me during the journey. I'm writing about interpretations elsewhere. Some of the visions were incomplete, like the Earth's recycling or compositing role in the universe, the architecture of the mind, and the content of the riddles. In retrospect, it seems like I was being shown just enough to walk away with a sense of meaning and appreciation. Returning home and re-engaging with my career, hobbies and relationships, I have a new curiosity about why I'm doing the things I do. What purpose does this or that activity serve? I want to make the best use of my time in this life. It seems more precious now. I still get impatient in traffic, but have a bit more equanimity about it. I have more compassion for people, recognising that our behaviour is largely shaped by how we were raised and by the people, content and environments that inform our minds. I recognise that my perception and understanding of reality is limited. I express gratitude for life and ask for help in living it. I feel more purpose in practicing meditation and yoga. The vision of humanity cooperating on Earth comes to me regularly, and I stay open to the possibility that there's something I can do to nurture that harmony. For now, that means being a little more open and generous to others, and accepting life as it is in this moment. Thank you, reader, for your valuable attention.
Powerful but Gentle. An Ibogaine Trip Report by CS. Posted to earwid.org February 16th, 2005. I'm recalling this Ibogaine experience after 14 moons. In this time, I've remained opiate free, and now I feel it's the right time to tell my little story. Prior to my experience of Ibogaine, I was a heroin methadone junkie for over 9 years, and had tried countless times and many different ways to quit. I'd sought Ibogaine for 5 years out of those 9 years of addiction, starting with street rumours about a miracle African root that cures heroin addiction. Eventually, I was directed to a couple of clinics, but the cost was just not realistic enough for a simple street junkie like myself. I did, however, run into someone on the internet that invited me to sit in on an Ibogaine treatment session. I'll recount this because it ends up being a major factor of my Ibogaine experience. My girlfriend and I visited, apparently unbeknownst to the guy receiving the treatment, and the whole experience was nightmarish. The guy giving the treatment had fresh track marks. The guy receiving the treatment didn't look happy and looked sick, tripping fierce at the same time. I saw him 4 days later back on the street hunting down the dope. I left with the impression that it was a scam, that this guy was doing treatments with alleged Ibogaine to get his dope fix. I doubted the potential of Ibogaine concerning my own addiction, and thus gave up my search for this amazing stuff that would one day save my life. And then one morning, a couple of years later, and quite out of the blue, a friend called me and said that he had a friend who was in town, and that he gave out Ibogaine treatments. The timing was good, because I was due to go to Mexico in a couple of weeks, and wasn't looking forward to being sick down there. 2 weeks prior to this, I had attempted a cold turkey kick in the woods because of my up-and-coming departure to Mexico, but this only lasted 2 days. I guess despite what I had seen and felt from my past search in Ibogaine, I was still suspicious that it might work, not to mention desperate. I got a call a few days later and arranged a meeting at a nearby bar with a guy I referred to henceforth as Chris. This guy was right out of a B-grade Mad Max type flick. Mohawked, bones in his ears, dirty clothes, someone who had definitely walked the path more than a few times. He was homeless, living out of his van. I was slightly sceptical, considering his attire and nomadic ways, but he talked good in the way when someone really believes what they're saying. We met many times over the next week, talking over coffee, about Ibogaine, about my past, how big a habit I had, medical history, etc. I was told a reasonable sum of money for the treatment was in order, though in my current financial situation it still seemed somewhat improbable. But we continued to meet, and he continued to encourage me to work up some money. 4 days before my departure date to Mexico, we talked heavily about the money situation. I just didn't have it. I could barely hustle my little 3/4 gram a day habit. I called several people, more or less begging to loan me some money for a miracle route from the African continent. First off, I didn't have the best credit history, and then on top of it, a junkie trying to get a loan for a magic African route, a mildly comical situation to most people. I went to bed that night feeling bummed. Sick in Mexico with the family wouldn't be a pretty story to say the least. But then early the next morning, 3 AM or so, my father left $300 on my table. That next morning I got a call. "Look dude, I know you don't have any money," but I interjected, "Well, I do have money." I got the feeling from that call that he would have done the treatment regardless of my lack of money at the time. It greatly impressed me. Chris came over to my apartment at 4 PM. Strangely, everyone in the apartment had to leave and wouldn't be back until the next evening. He had me write an IOU for the remaining cost. We were ready to go. I had my last fix at 2 PM. We decided at 6 PM that I was sober enough to go ahead with the experiment. At 6:30, I took a test dose of 250 milligrams. At 7:30, I took another 270, and at 8 PM, I took the big gulp at 1000 milligrams. After this, I was somewhat physically and mentally impaired, but managed to take another bitter dose of 300 milligrams down the hatch at 9:30 PM. Then, I laid down into a kind of unrestful sleep or stupor. Let me note that I stretched the truth and told Chris I weighed in at 68 kilograms when I actually weighed 60. Also, let me add that it was after many discussions concerning my past use of hallucinogens and physical and mental health that he decided to go with these doses. I mention the dosage amounts purely for informational purposes. They are by no means a framework to follow for other treatments. I awoke sometime around 11 PM, not feeling all that good, slightly sick, psychedelically disoriented. I started to imagine that I was involved in a scam. My mind created elaborate scenarios of a scam taking place, as well as the people involved, the reasons why, etc. I walked out of my room and confronted Chris, asking if he was a scammer. He replied no, and said it in such a way that I felt he believed in what he was doing. I felt his sincerity, and started questioning my own creative imagination. He said I should take more Ibogaine. I didn't like that idea at all. I already felt like I was tripping hardcore right now, so I decided in my delirium to give it a little more time. I went to the bathroom and puked out the most vile orange stuff I had ever seen in my life. I felt there was a connection to my puke and my addiction, like something was being exorcised from my system. It was an uncanny feeling. Something really was happening. My mind went back and forth from the idea of a scam going down to the idea of a demon being exorcised from our being with a magic African root. I went to my bedroom and laid down. I've realised that something was working. I was starting to feel better. Things got clearer and more lucid. I saw how a part of me that was scared to let go of the addiction was creating elaborate storyboards and acting out amazing plays in an attempt to remain addicted. I was amazed at how my mind could be trying to sabotage itself in this way. I found it slightly humorous, and saw the attempt as utterly futile. I encouraged that part of my mind to relax and let go. I had some other interesting visions during this time, but mostly I just recall being inside my mind, seeing trillions of neurons, my whole neural network, the universe that I am. And then, I saw that a part of that neural network was highlighted. It was signifying that this is where my addiction was from, but not just heroin, much, much more. And then, something in my head said, "Watch this." And slowly, the pattern was being extracted, slowly pulled out until it finally disappeared in the distance. I was utterly amazed. I must have awoke shortly after that. In my kitchen was this pink-looking dude watching over me, making sure everything was going smooth. Some dude that I had only met a week earlier. He was frying up some greasy potatoes. I was amazed. I saw a guy who was helping others by helping himself. An urban shaman of sorts. Helping those who want help on the same path that he once walked himself. And then, like looking in a mirror, in him I saw myself. I saw that I was helping myself to heal myself through him. I said to him/me aloud, "Thank you for what you're doing, I think it's great." It was truly profound to me, so beautiful. I felt like I'd just come back from a long lost vacation. I felt proud unto myself, like I was bringing back a treasured gift to the totality of life. I laid there a while longer, amazed that I wasn't sick, that I felt so good to be alive, and I cried softly with much joy in my heart. The words gentle but powerful resonated through my mind the entire time. I stumbled out of my room and into the living room to the amazement of Chris. "What are you doing? You shouldn't be up right now," he exclaimed. "But I feel so good. I feel alive again. I feel the magic. It's been so long since I felt like this." We talked. I saw an old brother like me, from the very beginning of time and space. I was truly amazed. Right here in front of me was my forgotten brother, as ancient as I was. I loaded my bong with some fine herb and puffed. I looked about the room and saw everything as ancient, just as ancient as me. Every atom, every subatomic particle of it all. It was just that some parts had forgotten where they came from, what they were. I ate an apple, and it tasted beautiful. It felt so good not to be alone anymore. I felt utterly connected to every little bit of this cosmos. And then, I felt it. Shit, I saw it. It took me by surprise as well. An ancient wave of consciousness percolating through and from everything, moving through our beautiful planet, our Gaia. It spoke to me, but not in words, beyond words. It spoke from the very core of my being. It said that I have taken a long, hard path, precious beyond imagination, but that I was now done with that path, and it was time to unite upon another one. This consciousness was a multi-consciousness, a uniting of consciousness, if you will. It said the time is now, and that I was a part of this unity, this wave of consciousness, and that I always had been. It was healing, uniting. They were one and the same, really. I'd always struggled with this idea of a super-consciousness, but now it was undeniable. I felt it through every bone in my body. I felt synchronized. I understood it to be an idea that I would not only entertain, but nourish and propagate. By this time, I noticed that Chris had fallen asleep, surely assuming that by my super-ecstatic state that I was alright, and there were no worries of me shedding my clothes and raving mad through the streets. I sat for hours, amazed at the marvel that we call life. And then, soon came dawn. I retired to bed for a while, but didn't get much rest. I was still so intrigued by the wondrous beauty of it all. I relaxed most of the next day. Chris left around 4 p.m, and the other denizens of the house returned around 6. The next evening, I boarded a plane for Mexico. It all seemed so superbly synchronistic. Looking back, Mexico was one of the best things I could have done on top of the Ibogaine. It provided a place away from my normal space and routine, my old patterns. It helped to build new patterns and gave them some time to set in. I'm sure that if I had stayed in my old familiar place, it would have been much more difficult and challenging. So now, 14 moons later, it feels good to write this story. It makes me smile at how truly magical life is with all its ironic synchronicities. Writing my story is also in part a completion of sorts, and a hope and inspiration to others who feel that they're at the end of the road and ready for a new journey. Mucho amor. Additional notes on Ibogaine. Extreme auditory enhancement. I could hear the minutest of sounds over a very large range and perceive them all simultaneously. This lasted approximately 10 to 12 hours. Mild visual enhancement. Vivid colours, more colours, edge detection. A classic tryptamine-induced visual perception of things lasting approximately 10 to 12 hours. Ataxia. I definitely had coordination issues. Walking took some effort, and anything beyond what would have been difficult. This lasted approximately 36 hours. Insomnia. For the following 2 weeks, I slept little. A few hours at most in one stretch, but I felt good despite this, waking up feeling motivated and refreshed each time. Shoutouts. To Noah, Chris, and my pop. To all the others who've let me kick cold turkey in their apartments, houses, tree houses, basements and backyards. To all the girls and guys who still love me, even though I was a selfish junkie who was in love with his dope. And most importantly, but not always so obvious, thank you to the great mystery, for it is you, or us, that made this all possible, and I am eternally grateful. Well, that couldn't have gone better for our kid, could it really? It's a testament to the power of Ibogaine and how it effectively treats addiction, possibly more effectively than majority of psychedelics. Obviously, each psychedelic can make you face your traumas, face your shadow, work through these things like addiction, but Ibogaine really seems to get to the core of it more so than any other psychedelic treatment that there is out there. And obviously, if you've seen in the news lately, clinics and scientists around the world are trying to turn a profit from this plant, which is it's going to open up a lot of grey areas, I believe, because obviously it's going to be absolutely fantastic that people can treat their addiction in such an efficient manner, but we know what happens when you start to lump profits into anything that has spiritual value. It could go one or two ways. At the end of the day, the only way to truly find out is for them to embrace it, is for the medical world to embrace it. Hopefully they do it in a conscious, loving, empathetical manner, and it's not just all about profit. But at the end of the day, the only way that it's going to come to fruition is through a profit-based motivation. So yeah, I think this is probably the best Ibogaine report I've ever read. It's the top one on Erowid. I really wanted to share this one because it just hammers home all of the positive benefits of using it. Obviously, it can be quite a rough experience. There's a lot of purging involved, which has a lot of similarities to ayahuasca, which has also great potential for curing addiction and etc. It's really just fascinating how it can get to the very core of what's going on and sort of strip it down by itself. Even though you will have to face up to it, as you will in any sort of psychedelic ritual, Ibogaine and ayahuasca just seems to do a lot of the heavy load work for you, unlike, say, other psychedelics where, say, I don't know, you're trying to treat addiction via DMT or LSD. A lot of it will be your individual consciousness itself having to work through it, but with Ibogaine and ayahuasca, it's almost the power of this, or the spirit, if you will, of these chemicals. Not saying there is some super fucking like ghost thing inside them that's sorting you out, it's just a metaphor, isn't it? That seems to chip away at it for you, which makes it a lot easier for addicts who are, say, majorly in denial or have seriously like deep-rooted addictions that they can't fess up to themselves with the help of a psychedelic, can use these plant medicines to actually take a lot of the weight off for them and iron out all the kinks that they're experiencing in their psyche that are the root cause of these addictions. What's really interesting about Ibogaine therapy is that the majority, or at least a big chunk of these therapy sessions that you undergo, are run solely by people who've just used Ibogaine to get clean in the past and want to help others do the same, like how he refers to in this report as being an urban shaman of sorts. And actually, these treatments are generally more affordable than the traditional rehab clinics in the US. Apparently, that goes upwards of like $12,000, which is like fucked. And they offer opioid use as another option when rehabilitation and the 12-step programs have failed. And it's oftentimes more effective because it is getting to the root cause of the problem. Like, this just ties in with just why are psychedelics so powerful with treating trauma. I've reiterated this a lot in the past. It's because it's getting to the core, the deep root of where it's coming from, rather than say, obviously I don't want to demonize antidepressants or people who go through therapy, because it is effective and it does work for a lot of people, but also for the other half of people who have it, it can actually be detrimental or just be completely ineffective. And so for those sort of people, Ibogaine's a fucking godsend, really, innit? So yeah, it really needs to start taking off, and the popularity of Ibogaine treatment over like the past decade or so, it's obviously catching the attention of these researchers, drug developers, and hopefully it gets incorporated more into the sort of depression treatment, anxiety treatment sphere that therapists engage in. But there also will be a lot of backlash, as of course, as there always is, from the traditional sort of scientific crowd, where it's like, oh, we shouldn't be using these chemicals. Not saying the majority of people don't think that. I'd say any trustworthy scientist or therapist would be more than game for this. I know a mate who going through therapy, and his therapist is more than game for Ibogaine mushroom treatment for depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses, because why wouldn't you? It's completely proven, and if it works, the thing is, at the end of the day, if it works for your patient, that should be the main thing, really, because why else are you doing this job? Obviously you're trying to make money and it's your career and your life purpose, but the root desire of wanting to do that should be because you want to love people and help them and allow them to grow, because that's more rewarding than any fucking wad of cash, really, isn't it? Well, at least I think so. So yeah, if you've had any experience with Ibogaine, please let me know, and I'll be interested to feature it in the future. But until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. My most beautiful experience. An Ibogaine trip report by Mary. Uploaded to earwid.org January 24th, 2016. I took the Ibogaine a day and a half after my 25th birthday. I'd been addicted to heroin since I was almost 21 years old. I've tried kicking before, but not for some time, and never more than for a few days. I used my last dose at 10 AM Tuesday morning, and I started taking my Ibogaine in capsules. I put them in at 6 PM that night. Now, I don't think anyone should do this at home when there are clinics, but this was my last chance. I was so sick of the life that I did not care if I died, so I figured, what the hell. I'd taken it once before, but in too small an amount for true addiction interruption, and not only was it really intense, but it happened right as the Sandy Hook shooting happened, which really messed me up for a long time, and scared me away from taking it again. My fiancée was there to take care of me, and when I started to freak out at about 45 minutes into the experience, he calmed me down by telling me there was nothing to do but go through with it, and only time would be the cure. He had me lay down in a dark room with a candle right away. Almost 2 hours in, I felt myself really going into it, and hurried and took the rest of my dose. My body was burning all over, and although it did not hurt, it wasn't pleasant either. There was also the telltale metallic buzzing that seems common in reports, but for me, it seemed to be an intelligence of its own. It was like it came with the Iboga, and it was there to see me through. At this point I can't even keep my eyes open, and I begin to go into the dream world. I start in this dark world or realm, which seems to be like a hell, where I'm reborn from a plant. New and clean, a shaman-looking man comes to me and tells me, "Finally, I've been waiting for you." I think this is the spirit of Iboga, and I go with him, where he shows me over and over the world's addicts, telling me I'm not an addict unless I choose to be addicted, over and over. This is where my experience becomes unlike everything I have read. Apparently I did vomit several times, small amounts, and I got out of bed and put myself in the bathroom with blankets and pillows, but I have no personal memory of any of this. I then go into several different realities that I live in for months and years. These realities are in the past and future and present and all over the world, one in space and one in a different world entirely. Every reality I lived in was a metaphor, or sometimes more direct, for the things I needed to be shown and live. I won't go into a lot of detail because there was so much. When I wrote it down for myself, it was over 10 pages, single space typed, and I kept adding to it as I remembered more. One day, I will put it out there, but not until I am satisfied with it because of how beautiful the experience was for me. But in one vision, I was travelling to different places where certain special things were supposed to happen, and it wasn't until a goddess-like entity came and told me I was expecting things to happen just so, and that is why it would not work for me every time I tried. I then let go, and the amazing things started working for me. I took this to mean I should relax on expecting things to turn out just right. I later experienced, almost like a movie, how the human race would end itself. This kept replaying over and over with a small change every time, where I got further and further until I figured out a way to stop it. I took this as telling me not only could I change, but I could cause it as well. I also lived in several worlds where my fiancé and I kept using, and in each one we became terrible people, and something awful happened as a result. This message was very clear to me. Kept on like this though, with all these different realities, I kept living in them to learn these certain lessons. They seemed as real to me as anything, and in fact when I came out of it, they were registered as memories, and I kept insisting, for instance, that we had went to France, which was one of the places I went in my head, because that was how vivid it was. The mistake I made was travelling very soon afterwards. I had a flight Thursday night at midnight that I missed, so I got one Friday morning to go across the country to my family so I could break my habit. The problem was that even though I took it Tuesday evening, I was in the trip until Thursday at midnight, and I wasn't right for days after. That means I tripped for about 52 hours, with an additional 2-hour come up and about a 4-day come down, during which time I could barely even walk, eat or take care of myself. I did still have about 20 to 30% of the withdrawals I would have gotten, and still had cravings for about 2 weeks, which then went away. I know this works better for some people and isn't so intense, but I'm so grateful for what it did for me, and I know this is a divine gift. I'm ready to literally dedicate the rest of my life to it, because it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, and although it hasn't been that long, I have no desire to ever do addiction to myself ever again. Personally, I recommend anyone with an addiction to try this, and go in with an open mind. I'd also recommend going to a clinic, because I lost £15 I couldn't afford to lose, and almost died. I hope this beautiful drug, however, gets the credit it deserves. Sorry, I'm all over the place, I'm still not 100% as of now, but I just had to get this out. Everything is so beautiful now, I can't help but cry at their beauty. Life is much better. An Iboga trip report from Irwin, published on January 24th, 2010. So I'd like to explain the Iboga experience after actually experiencing it myself. I wouldn't know where to start, but I suppose I will start from the beginning. I went to my girlfriend's on the Friday night, and to be honest I was pretty apprehensive, and it was going to be a big thing for me. I had already decided that. The first thing was that I was really hungry, as there was to be no eating before the Iboga trip, and also no water a certain amount of time before it. I was nervous, hungry and very thirsty. Not the combination to take drugs to, you would have thought. But I think the most important thing to point out is that this is not a drug, and I will explain later why I think that. I started with a tester dose, which were 2 tablets, which had about 0.5 grams in each tablet. We sat and watched The Simpsons, and unbelievably my paranoia seemed to really calm down and I was okay. There were no real weird occurrences till about an hour later, when my girlfriend shouted me from the kitchen and her voice echoed like in a cave. I suppose it was then I knew things were getting different. I then proceeded up to my bed, where it was all set up cold turkey style. There was a mattress, cover, some toilet roll and a bucket. I sat there for a minute and then took my dose. I think there were about 6 tablets to take, so that upped my dose in all to 8 tablets, which in total was 4 grams of Iboga root bark. It was about 10 minutes after that I suddenly had a big bout of paranoia again.
I remember thinking if I can go and force myself to be sick, then I might avoid this whole thing. Reasoning prevailed though, and I just thought about all the crap that I've had with drugs and sat there. And I sat there. It must have been about an hour and a half before anything happened, and then, fucking hell, did something happen. The first thing that I noticed was my body start to feel incredibly heavy, almost like being very drunk, but without the crappy feeling that comes with it. To be honest, I really enjoyed the feeling, but I can see how it could be a bit heavy for some people. So, I laid back and looked about me. I only had a dim light on, but nothing much seemed to be happening as far as visuals went. My girlfriend suggested that I turn the light off and shut my eyes. Then it started. The first thing I remember seeing was my own eyes in front of me when I shut my eyes. It was very strange, and I almost felt like I wasn't part of myself, and I was looking in on my own brain. My brain seemed to be represented by this massive green neon matrix type thing, and I was looking at it. It also seemed to be sectioned off into different folders, almost like some kind of computer system. Then the vision started, and it was almost every time I shut my eyes. I would start going towards a different folder at what seemed like light speed, and then visions would hit me at 100 miles an hour. It was quite intense at first, and a lot to take in. And it wasn't just closed-eye visuals either. The neon experience then followed me into the bathroom as well, as I could see Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci, you know, the one they have on Panorama, and also visions of men shooting discs and things from a big cannon, all of which were in neon. But it was the closed-eye visuals that were the most intense. I saw and was there with a big gang of Asian youths fighting against the police, and almost had a conversation with a man named Jamal, who was fighting for a cause he didn't believe in. Everything seemed to have relevance and importance, and I had to just try and sort it out in my head, which at the time was very mixed up and all over the place, I would have thought. The main vision that made the difference, I feel, was seeing myself as a school child when I had a fight with a very popular kid at the school. I remember everyone turning on me and chasing me across the field. I bumped into two so-called friends at the time who also rejected me. I remember being so upset and so angry at the rejection that the rest of my life I had tried so hard to be friends with people, often people I didn't like, just to feel wanted. Again, this felt resolved as I saw it, and I seemed to feel better after seeing it. And then came the big one. I started to see myself, but from another person's point of view, almost like seeing someone that looked exactly like me. He was walking along, me that is, and suddenly he started to be attacked and beaten and then murdered. It was quite scary at first, but then I saw different versions of the so-called me being beaten, shot, hung, stabbed, electrocuted, and in fact every type of execution you can really think of. This to me was the murder of the old me and the birth of the new me. I also felt much better afterwards. I don't know how long these visions lasted, but my girlfriend was checking in on me all the time, and apparently I was trying to explain, and I was just talking gibberish. This went on into the next day as well. The day after I was still pretty gone, but I wasn't hallucinating, and then the purging started. I've always had a bit of a weak stomach, but I've never been sick like it in my life. I worked out I must have been vomiting for at least 2 hours, and it was one of the most gruelling experiences I've ever had. As you can imagine, there wasn't a lot to vomit, but somehow I found stuff in my body to vomit up. I think it was mainly acid and crap, but I believe it was more, and I think it was all the poison I had inside me. I know, a little spiritual, but I do think that's what happened. Then at the end I was very drained and tired, but I couldn't sleep. My body was fucked, but my mind was like a circuit board buzzing with all this new space I'd made in my brain. So, I suppose you want to know what's happened. Well, this is how it is. I'm now completely drug-free and haven't had a single craving since I took the Iboga. I feel much happier, much more awake and more active. I feel like I have a new lease of life, and that I really have a chance now of turning my life around. I've been sleeping less, but I've had more energy. Worked that one out. And I've been walking the dogs, which I never did before. But I must point out that my life isn't perfect. I haven't got a job, I've got no money. I've had to think about being friends with people I know, and have had to really want to change to keep up the positivity. So it hasn't just been that I took the iboga and life is perfect. In summary, life isn't perfect, but it's a million times better than it was.